Does the trade war become official today if this is what goes on, if the United States announces this $50 billion of IP-related tariffs?
I very much hope that it does not degenerate itself into a war. It's one thing to say that we need to negotiate the best deal, and indeed there is a lot to be improved in the current situation, and the property rights need to be secured. However, how to bring it about requires engagement, requires negotiations, and I'm a bit concerned with a setting in which you shoot, you hit, they hit back, and at the end of the day, you have a war. And, you know, in a world in which the rules of the game are an eye for an eye, that's the world where you have a lot of blind people. It's not the way we want to go. The world is very interconnected, and this interconnectedness has to be cherished, and it means trade, services, property rights, intellectual property rights, patents, but all of that requires a system in which you negotiate and you act, and there is a feedback and you communicate. It's a dialogue, and I would say even more. Our world, because it is so global and because it is so interconnected, while two individual countries, important as they are, can and should negotiate, the world is multilateral. So the trading system, at the end of the day, needs to address such issues rather than just exclusively in a bilateral term.
Jacob Frenkel, you talk about the kind of escalation that potentially we could see here. Is that what we should anticipate? How should China respond if these tariffs are unveiled a little bit later today? Should it be an eye for an eye?
Absolutely not. Of course, you know, there is an issue of tactics and there is an issue of strategy. And we should not confuse them. I think it is essential that both sides will make a clear declaration that the ultimate objective is open markets with free and fair trade. Once this compass is directed towards that particular direction, then deviations from it can be viewed as a negotiating ploy which may improve matter at some stage, but may also be costly, like all wars. However, if it is not becoming clear where the end game is, then it can have profound negative implications. I want you also to remember, and I'm not trying to make comparisons, but the fact of the matter is, we all studied elementary history, and in the 1930s, when there was the Great Depression, many argue that the trigger, or one of the important triggers, was what is called the Smoot-Hawley tariff. There was a Senator Smoot and a Congressman Hawley. Jointly, they passed the tariff law that created an environment and a reality of tariff protectionism, trade war, and a deep depression. Let's not go into this direction.
Hey, Jacob Frenkel, Matt Miller here from Bloomberg in Berlin. I wonder what you would advise the Trump administration then, in a world where tariffs from the Chinese aren't coming down quickly enough, IP is consistently getting stolen. Even EU tariffs are so much higher on U.S. goods than U.S. tariffs are on EU goods. And complaints with the WTO and other kinds of multilateral negotiations just don't really bring the kind of results we want to see with the quickness that we need. What should the Trump administration then do?
First of all, you describe a very severe reality. And this reality, since it is being observed and shared by so many countries, this is almost an invitation for a forum that addresses it in a multilateral setting. Any country that needs to, that wants to become a member of the international community must satisfy some basic rules. These rules need to be agreed upon. By and large, they have been agreed also through the WTO, the World Trade Organization. The fact that they are not fully enforced means that we need to go to that system and ask, how do we put some teeth into it? I think it will be overburdening any single country to address the multilateral issues only through its own policy tools. It will be much more effective if the international community as a whole expressed its views in a uniform way, in a collegial way, and that will be also much more, in a way, deterrent.
Is this the kind of thing, Jacob? Sorry. Is this the kind of thing that you typically see near the end of a cycle? And I ask this because there are concerns that I think JPMorgan has said over the next 3 years we may see an up to 40% correction in the stock market. The chances of a recession over the next 2 to 3 years are getting substantially higher than 30%. Are you concerned that we're near the end of the cycle here?
Well, to begin with, I'm not familiar with such a forecast of JPMorgan, so let's put this aside. Listen, what's going to happen in the economy and in the market is not predestined. It is reflecting and will reflect the policy measures that will be taking place. There is no theory whatsoever that will imply that we are supposed now to go into a downturn. On the contrary, we are now remembering the 10th anniversary of the big crisis that started a decade ago. What happened in the year 2009? This was the year of the worst performance of economic growth in the industrial world. It shrunk by 3.5%. It so happens to have been also the year in which world trade has shrunk by 10 or 11%, the only year where trade has shrunk since the creation. This correlation should not escape us. If you really want to secure growth, you must secure trade. Yep. If you are going to impose tariffs, tariffs are a tax on trade, and you will have less of it, less growth, less of every good stuff that we want. Look how many millions of people all over the world have been elevated from poverty just because of trade.
Jacob Frenkel, one final quick question. The Federal Reserve Chair, the new Fed Chair, last night indicating that he is unconcerned about the imminent arrival of inflation. Where is inflation? Are we going to get it anytime soon? And is the Fed Chair right to be relaxed about it?
I did not see this exact quote, so I can only answer the question that you are asking me, which is, where is inflation? It is obvious to everyone that the inflationary pressures today are non-existent. Most of the countries' inflation levels are below the 2% that they are trying to aim to achieve. However, we should also remember that if you wait for the 2% to recognize that inflation is on the rise, you will have missed and will have maybe created an overshooting. The job of a central banker is not to look through the back mirror, but to anticipate the next turn. And I'm sure that the Fed is going to do it in a very wise way, as they have been doing to date. I think that the decisions of the Fed that were announced yesterday were just the right decisions. They included in it also guidance for the next, not only 2019, but also 2020. They basically say we are normalizing, the economy is improved, unemployment is as low as it was, and we can afford normalizing, and we will go in small and measured steps, and that's the right way to proceed.